welcome to another technology video. So in part one of our QNAP series, we looked at upgrading the RAM and installing the disks. This session we're going to focus on the full configuration of the device and what we need to do to enable that to happen. So the first thing you want to do is you want to find the device on your network. So this is a fresh install with the disk that we've just installed in part one and the RAM upgrade in part one. So we're going to be using Angry IP Scanner to find it on the network. So we're going to sweep our network and see if we can find it. And once we do, we're going to access it via the IP address. We're then going to run through all of the configuration options. Okay, so there it is. So 192.168.0.72. Okay, so let's open that up then. I'm going to go 192.168.0.72. Okay, so this is the first screen that we see. We're going to run through the smart installation guide. We're going to set our host name as something of your choosing. You're going to set a password, and then we're going to move on to the next stage. So GMT, Dublin, Edinburgh, Lisbon and London is us, so that's fine. We don't need to do anything there, don't need to change it. If you're not sure whether you've got internet access or not, then just hit the test button. That will go off and check to see if you can get a connection. We know ours is all right, so we're going to click on next, and we're going to give ours a static IP address, and we're going to change the DNS server. So we don't want the DNS server to be the device itself. We're not going to be using DNS services on it, so we're actually going to use our pfSense device to act as the DNS server, and then we're going to leave the secondary server as Google Primary DNS, and that is on Ethernet 1, which is what we're connected with. So we're going to close that, and then the next thing you want to do, if you've got Macs on your network, then you want to enable that so you can use it for Time Machine and access content, and same if you're using Linux or Unix of some description. We're not going to be using this, so we're just going to stick with Windows and Mac, and then we're going to move forward, and that is the initial configuration done. That will then go off, change all of the settings, and then reconnect us. It takes a few minutes, so just be patient. The actual startup, once this configuration is done, is a lot longer. Okay, this is the bit you've got to wait for. This is all the services that are starting up, and once the services have started up, we can then go in and we can tailor and tune, get the security set up, for instance, and then add the various file systems that we want to be using. Okay, there we go. So that's finally done. Now we can move on to the management and configuration. So these are just tells you about what to do to get going. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're not going to do the firmware upgrade just yet. and we are going to skip that. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add our volume. So we can see we've got 2 disks here. Disk 1 and disk 2. So disk 2, as you can see, look at the time. So this has been on power on 3 days 1 hour. Disk 2, 1,000 days. So this is the one that was previously used on a system by us before. So it's a good disk. So we are going to be keeping an eye on that just to make sure that that doesn't go pop, and when it does, we will replace it. So the first thing we want to do is we actually want to create our storage pool. So we're not going to be enabling Q tier. So Q tier, as it says there, allows you to add different types of drives. We've only got a 2 drive slot, so, or 2 drive enclosure, so we're not going to be using that. If you've got multiple disk enclosure, like 4 or 8, then you might want to enable that option. So we are going to select our disks, both disks selected, and we're going to be choosing RAID 1, and we don't have a hot spare. And we're going to set our alert threshold to be 90%. That should be sufficient for us. And then we are going to create. So once we've created our storage pool, we can then go in and we can create our volumes on that storage pool. Okay, so that's our storage pool created. The next thing that we want to do is to create a volume on our storage pool, and we're going to select storage pool 1. Now we're going to make this a thick volume, and we are going to call this system, and we are going to set this to 100 gig, and we're going to set it to 8K bytes per inode, which gives us a maximum volume size of 31 terabytes. We're not going to use that, and a maximum number of 13 million files and folders. The alert threshold we're going to leave at 80%. We're not going to encrypt it, and we're going to create a shared. We're not going to create a shared folder on the volume either, because this is going to be used for our system. So we're going to say next and then finish. So because we've named it, the first volume you create, it's going to create the default folders that it needs and file system that the system needs. So this is for installing applications and things like that. So the first volume that you create, you want to make sure that that is going to be used for the system. Otherwise you'll just have to go back in and rename it afterwards. Seems pointless. So always create the first volume as the system volume. we go, and as you can see here, it's called it, well, it's told us that it's using the first volume as the system volume, so that's why we always call it system, so that we don't get confused and we know it's the system volume. Okay, there we go. So that is all done. It's already used up 16 gig of that. It's moved some of the applications on there. Okay, so now that's done, what we can do is we're now going to move through and run through our settings. So the first thing we're going to do is just to step through this. We want to enable secure connections, and we want to enable force HTTPS, which when we do, it should probably log us out, knowing the system. So going forward, it will want us to connect via HTTPS only. Okay, so daylight saving, standard daylight saving based on the time zone, so that's fine. Code page is English, region is global, and then the login settings, if you want to show the firmware version, if you want a nice colourful pictured background, or choose your own, basically, you can do here. So next thing is we've done this one for now. We want to move on to security. So what we want to do is we want to protect our NAS drive, and we're going to do this by, we're only going to allow, because it's only going to be used on our local network, we're only going to allow access to it from the local network only, so nothing can access it from outside, basically. So we're going to say allow connections from the list only. That's better. It's giving us an add button now, so now we can add it, and we're going to add it based on an IP network, which we do here. So we're going to do 192.168.0.0. That's 255 because it's 24-bit subnet. So what this is telling the system basically is only allow access to the device if you're on the local network, and we're going to apply that. Say yes. It doesn't stop. So say you've got, say you've been hacked and there's something on your network that is already accessible from outside, then this isn't going to help you, basically. But this just gives us a little bit of additional security. Certificate and private key. We are using the default certificate. And the password policy, we are not fussed about this, to be honest, at the moment. You can say you want your NAS users to regularly change their password, and also if you want them to get them to use upper and lowercase, you know, the standard password stuff. Okay, so moving on to hardware. So that's all fine. Enable configuration reset switch. So there's a reset switch on the back of the device. If you press it for 3 seconds, it will reset the username and the password and the DHC. It will return the network to be DHCP. So we're going to disable that so that people can't reset the device. Yep, we want to do that. Enable disk standby mode. The status LED will turn off if there's no access within 30 minutes. Yep, that's good. And enable the light signal alert. That's fine. Enable write caching. Run user-defined processes at startup. Well, we haven't got any of those, so we don't need to do it. Turn on the LED light. That is correct. Audio alert. So we're going to turn that off, and we're going to leave it on for system events, so errors and warnings. So in other words, if your disk's failing, then you'll get an audible message or an audible tone. And we want to enable smart fan, so if the system is busy, it'll ramp up, and if it's not busy, it'll ramp down. And then we're going to monitor the temperatures. That's fine. Power. So we're going to leave this to disabled. The power consumption of the server is slightly higher than 1 watt when the server is turned off. Wake on LAN, we are going to enable that. Power recovery, so we're going to restore the previous power state. So if there's an outage, the box will turn back on again if it was on. If it was already off, it will leave it switched off. And then the power schedule, we're not having a power schedule, so you can shut down your box and get it to start up. Notification center, we're going to come back to that later. That's for setting up, you know, if we've got issues with anything, we can get it to email notifications out. System status we wanted to have a look at, because we upgraded the memory from 2 to 4 gig, so we want to make sure that actually we've got 4 gig, and we do have 4 gig. You can see here 2 slots populated with 2 gig in each gives us a total of 4 gig. That's all fine. So that's it in terms of the initial setup goes. What I'm going to do now is we're going to upgrade the firmware. So we want to go back to our firmware update option on the control panel. So we click on firmware update, and then we'll say there's a new firmware. So we're going to check for an update, and then it's going to prompt us to install that. So we're going to say OK to that. We know our NAS is supported, so we're going to click on continue. That will then run through the update. Okay, so we've gone from 4.3 to 4.5. Close that. Don't want that to open again. Okay, so we've got a multimedia console, file station, that's all fine. So what we want to do is just review to make sure everything's looking healthy. Just got to wait for these items to start up. Hybrid backup sync installing. So let's have a look at the App Center. Okay, so we want to have an SSL certificate, QTS SSL certificate. Okay, so let's get started. So what we need to do is to sign into our QNAP Cloud account. Don't need that. Publish services, access control, private. That's it. Okay, so that's what you need to do. First of all, we're going to register our device on myQNAPcloud so you can access it from their cloud portal, which is absolutely fine. We're not worried about web connectivity. We do want to install a certificate, so we're going to use a Let's Encrypt certificate. So hopefully this will install. Okay, so it wants us to redo it because it's obviously got a different certificate now. As you can see, we've got a new app here called Malware Removal and Hybrid Backup Sync 3, which we're going to be using to do a NAS drive to NAS drive backup later. Let's go back to our applications. Okay, so we've installed our SSL certificate now. We're not going to be using QSync Central, we're going to be using Hybrid Backup Sync. But in terms of initial configuration and upgrade of the system, that is now complete. That's what we wanted to go through in terms of this video. So if you found that video useful, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in part 3. Thanks for watching.